What is up, you guys? Jury here, and welcome back to a new video. So as you can already see, we are going to be reacting to PewDiePie's viral Linux video, and in this reaction I'm just going to basically react to this video and give my own opinions about Linux, whether or not Linux is going to get the attention it needs, whether people are going to adopt to it, and what challenges people might face when they switch to Linux. So yeah, we're going to be talking about that. I don't think there's anything I want to add at this point, so without further ado, let's basically get into the reaction. Before I start reacting, I just want to give you a warning, and that is that since this is my first time reacting, there's a chance that I might stutter a lot. So if I do a lot, that means that I'm basically thinking and giving my opinions. So I might stutter a lot, I might ramble a lot because I do go off topic sometimes, but I'll try my best to stay in topic. So you have been warned. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video.
Oh, you little cat. Oh, you poor boy. You disgusting little thing. Oh, what happened to you? Oh, look at yourself. You're the...
Okay, so I'm guessing he's referring to people's frustrations with Windows. So that's one of the first things I've already noticed, which is quite understandable because people do run into issues with Windows, but so is Linux as well. Linux is not perfect. Sometimes I do run into my own issues, but yeah, it's kind of funny that he added that in this video, well, at the start of this video actually.
Don't worry, I can save you. Install Linux. What if I told you you can look like this? Anyway, let me start this off by saying I am not a tech guy. You saw my PC build.
Definitely. I can understand that because when I watched his video of him building a gaming PC, I think that was his video. Obviously he did make a lot of mistakes, but again, I can understand why he's not a tech guy because it was his first time building his PC, so there was nothing wrong with that. I actually enjoyed watching his video, to be honest. So yeah, I understand that quite a lot.
What you did see was 0.5 seconds of the video where I installed Linux on the thing, and a lot of people just went, what? Some people seem...
Yeah, I'm sure people were just as shocked as Mota was, because when I watched those few seconds, I was like, wait, no way he actually switched to Linux.
At the time, I didn't know the power that I had. I was like a baby with a rocket launcher. For years, I have been tortured by Windows. But now, alas, I am finally free. I escaped.
I'm curious if he's going to give his reasons as to why he switched to Linux. If it's going to be, like, I don't know, if it's going to be AI or overall bloat or just, I don't know, performance issues. I'm curious as to why he switched to Linux though. So,
number one, Windows talks to me like I'm a baby. Now, mentally, I might be, but that does not warrant. You want Candy Crush? You want Candy Crush on your computer? You want to use Bing? Yes. Are you sure you want to delete that file? Are you super duper sure you want to delete that file? That's how it talks to me, and I don't like it. Linux, on the other hand, literally puts a gun in your hand and says...
Also, I'm guessing it's basically about having user control, because with Linux you can basically do whatever you want since you are in control of the system, whereas Windows, Microsoft has control of the system. So in a way you have control, but you don't have like full control of your system because you don't know what Windows is doing, right? A lot of the times people don't know what Windows is doing in the background. I mean, they do, but it's like when it comes to overall having full control, Microsoft has control. So a lot of the times people don't know what Windows is doing, whereas with Linux you have control and you can do whatever you want with it, whether you want to install install a distribution, or if you want to nuke your system, you can do that. Whatever it is, you pretty much have control over what you want to do. So basically, yeah, Linux, you have control.
But first, reason number two, as an epic minimalist, the bloat The bloat is real. It always bothered me. Anytime I install a new Windows, I spent like an hour trying to uninstall all the pre-packaged BS that I don't want.
Yeah, this is something that I can relate to and that a lot of Linux users can relate to as well. Like I said, the amount of bloat that Windows comes is just, in my opinion, is just too much. I feel like if Windows comes pre-installed with, I want to say, only necessary applications, then that's fine, but the rest of the other applications are just not needed. And good luck trying to uninstall them, because like after an update, let's say you find basic PowerShell scripts you can use on the internet to uninstall some of these or like apps that on Windows that are just permanent. After a huge update, those apps are gonna come back. So Windows is pretty much bloated. But when it comes to Linux, I would say that yes, it is bloated if you use something like Linux Mint, but the good thing about that is that you can uninstall those apps. So if you don't want them, you can just like uninstall them. Whereas with Windows, good luck, because it's almost impossible. You cannot uninstall the amount of bloatware that comes from Windows. So I can understand that totally.
Windows is like, I know you paid $100 or whatever for me, but I'm still gonna put ads in here. Yes, put a little AI in here. You want that, right?
Yeah, AI thing, that's something I also talked about in my video where I switched to Linux and my ever experience with Windows. The AI thing is what really made me want to use Linux, because there was no way I was going to let AI, in this case Copilot, to track literally everything I'm doing. I would prefer to have a little bit of privacy, and that's what Linux offers. So basically, the AI Copilot really just rubbed me the wrong way when I heard that Windows 11 was going to have it. So yeah, as for ads, again, same thing as bloatware. Microsoft is becoming a service, and I think people are already noticing that. So yeah, that's just the Windows at this point. I don't know how to say it. That's how they're pretty much making money, and I don't blame Windows. I understand if they want to make as much money as they can, but when they have too many ads, it just becomes literally unbearable to escape them.
Reason number 3, customization. I discovered this afterwards. Customizing on Linux is a beautiful thing. On Windows, you can maybe change your wallpaper, change a little bit of colors, whoopity-doo. On Linux, you can change reality itself.
That's something I also agree. When it comes to Linux, there are so many ways you can customize your Linux distro. It doesn't matter if you're using Fedora, Ubuntu, Linux Mint. You can customize it to however you want, and that's what I really like about Linux. With Windows, I think there are ways to customize it, but when it comes to Linux, I feel like Linux has over the edge when it comes to customization. So yeah, that's something I also agree with.
Since Linux is built modular, you can swap out your GUI entirely. You don't even have to use one.
Oh, I forgot to mention. So on Linux, we have what's so-called desktop environments. So in this case, I'm using Fedora, so I'm using GNOME, which is pretty much I want to say the de facto for desktop environments, but there are other desktop environments like KDE. We have Cinnamon. If you're on Mint, we also have XFCEE. We also have Hyprland, which is, I want to say, more advanced. But if you know what you're doing and if you configure Hyprland correctly, you could get from this to this.
Reason number 4, gaming. Gaming on Linux is finally real. I actually installed Linux 15 years ago. That's right, I'm old. And I uninstalled it after like a couple days, as a lot of people do, when they realize, oh, I can't use the things I need on Linux. And for me, that was gaming back then, because it's like, well, then what's the point?
Yeah, when it comes to gaming on Linux, I'm just going to say this. It has definitely got better. This is not like the 2000s where only a few titles were playable on Linux. This is 2025, and with Proton, DXVK, and all of these things, Linux has got to the point where playing games is better. Now, of course, there's the elephant in the room that these anti-cheats that are on these multiplayer games that are popular, they're not going to work on Linux. That's something that is still a problem, unfortunately. So if you play, I don't know, games like Fortnite or COD or Valorant, then you might want to stick to Windows, because those games have one of the most intrusive kernel level anti-cheats that they will not be happy with Linux. Okay, so I want to say, if you play single player games, you're going to have a good experience when it comes to game, like basically gaming on Linux. So yeah, gaming has got better, definitely. I 100% agree. That's what this channel is about. I do make tutorials on how to play certain games on Linux, and yeah, Linux when it comes to gaming is pretty much amazing, and I'm happy that Linux has come this far.
But now, gaming on Linux is real at last. So Valve came in like Gandalf in Helm's Deep, riding a Steam Deck with Proton. So I think this is a perfect example how Linux benefits everyone. The fact that Valve as a company recognized maybe Microsoft has a bit too much power. If they wanted to and started being shady, locking things down, taking cuts.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. I feel like the moment the Steam Deck gets popular, and if this like Steam thing really blows up, then there's a chance that developers might actually start to consider, gaming on Linux, because I feel like a lot of gaming companies really just don't like Linux because of, people might cheat, or they just don't like, I don't know, I feel like they just don't like Linux as a whole. If anything, mostly due to the fact that Linux is, customizable, and it's all about having control. So they fear that if they implement, or if they try to let us Linux users play these multiplayer games, then chances are they're gonna think that we're going to cheat, because Linux is more open than Windows. But the truth is, since the player base for Linux especially when it comes to multiplayer games, is so low, that the cheating that a lot of people are seeing nowadays mostly comes from Windows, because, well, Windows has a big market share. A lot of the software is developed on Windows, a lot of the games are developed on Windows, and a lot of the cheating comes from Windows. And I want to say Linux probably has maybe a 2 or 1% of people cheat, but the fact that it's so low shows that people are not going to make cheats for Linux, they're not going to make them for Windows. Yeah, if Steam really blows up, then these gaming companies might consider adding their games for Linux. So that's something that everyone is hoping, and so do I. But yeah, let's see if this thing really works out. I just hope it does, because that would solve I want to say 90% of the compatibility with online games and other games that have shitty DRM.
Now I've gone through the reasons why I switched to Linux. Let me just explain why maybe not switching is a good idea. Because everything good comes with a sacrifice. If you're swapping to Linux, you'll likely have to give something up. I don't know what it is, but for me, it was Photoshop.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about this, and I might ramble about it because I have a lot to say about this. So when it comes to switching to Linux, and I agree with them, there's a chance that you might have to give something up. Now, again, if you have not watched my video on me switching to Linux, I did talk about why I kept coming back to Windows. The reason why is because I was so dependent on Windows. I want to say I was dependent on specific Windows software that I knew was not going to work on Linux. The way I solved this was relatively simple. The moment I got a second PC for editing videos and somewhat gaming, that solved I want to say 100% of my issues when it comes to switching to Linux. Because the truth is, when it comes to Linux, yes, it's getting better, but certain software I want to say niche software just doesn't work on Linux. And I think this is the reason why a lot of people who want to switch to Linux are kind of reluctant, because they're dependent on specific software. If you use something like Adobe Premiere Pro, then I recommend you do not switch to Linux, because that software is just not gonna work. Or if you're someone who produces music, yeah, I would stay on Windows, because, well, that kind of software is not available on Linux, unfortunately. But here's the good news. We have so-called open source software. So these are basically alternative software that are somewhat based on Windows. But if you use something to, or if you use like a software to edit thumbnails, or if you're someone who is an artist, then you can use something like GIMP, which I know a lot of people don't like to use, but I want to say GIMP is probably the best software you can use on Linux. And with enough time, if you get the hang of it, then you might actually ditch some of these proprietary software that just doesn't work on Linux. You can use Kdenlive, which works really well on Linux, or you can use Shortcut, I believe, which is a software that actually works on Linux, if I'm not mistaken. So you have four alternative software for editing videos and creating thumbnails. Or if you're an artist, you can use that as well. But yeah, when it comes to switching to Linux, you have to make a sacrifice. Unless if you have a second PC like me, or if you want to joke with Windows, that's completely fine.
I used Photoshop, again, for 15 years. All the shortcuts, all my workflow, it's all baked into my brain. The way I use Photoshop, I don't think about it. It's just, here's the thumbnail. It's not beautiful, but I get the job done. Unfortunately, Adobe is a garbage company, and their software just won't run on Linux. A lot of artists are jumping ship. They don't want to use Adobe anymore.
Oh yeah, about that, although this has nothing to do with Linux, I have watched, not that I've watched, but I watched some videos of people actually teaching Photoshop, and these like Adobe products, simply because of how greedy Adobe is and how they really don't want you to unsubscribe. Otherwise, you have to pay like an unsubscription fee or something like that, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, that's something that I was not expecting from a company like Adobe. Yeah, it's kind of surprising how people are actually, teaching Adobe, because it is kind of getting worse when it comes to unsubscribing and overall just the amount of money you have to pay just to use their software.
Because they realize it's a terrible company. Me as well, I thought, you know what? It's time. I'll swap over. I know the open source alternative is GIMP. I've heard about this forever, and I thought, it'll feel good. I'll feel good leaving Adobe. So I'm ready. I go to their website, I click through the 1,000 pages, I crawl through the bushes just to find the goddamn unsubscribe button, and I was so ready. I was gonna be like, fuck you, Adobe, just unsubscribe. You know what happens?
Yeah, they forced you to pay an unsubscription fee, which is obviously, again, very greedy from Adobe.
They hit me with an unsubscription fee. Yes. Those... I'm sorry, what? I have to...
And the funny part is, I don't see any other company doing this. Like, I don't see Amazon forcing people to say, hey, you have to pay an additional unsubscription fee if you want to not use Amazon Prime or Netflix. I don't see Netflix doing this. I don't see any other company doing this, but Adobe is. So again, just the amount of frustration.
If anything, it just made me realize, okay, it's over. I'm never going back. So like I said, the open source alternative is GIMP. And since this is Linux, open source, you can do whatever you want. I downloaded this icon pack that changed the icons so they look like the Photoshop icons that have the look.
I don't have experience with GIMP. I use Canva to basically create thumbnails, and also I have little to no experience with GIMP, but maybe one day I might actually start using it, because Canva has some limitations that I noticed. So yeah,
A little bit. Then I downloaded a shortcut command list that matches the one on Photoshop. boom, made it a little easier. You know, I'm still not 100% used to it, but the fact that yeah, I can do stuff like this really helps. For me, personally, a worthy sacrifice. I hope this doesn't sound like copium, but genuinely, it feels good that I was able to move on. At the end of the day, some tools are only gonna work on Windows and only gonna work on Mac, but what you gain on Linux is so much more. Freedom. Join us. I'm just praying that Adobe is not just gonna show up one day and be like, there's another fee. I'll meet them in a dark alleyway. They'll be like, it's a little fee. Now that I've convinced you to swap to Linux, you have the wonderful choice of picking a distro.
Okay, this is by far the number one thing that will confuse a lot of people who are new to Linux. They'll be like, what on earth is this? There are so many different flavors. Where should I start? Which one is good for gaming? Which one is God knows what? I made a video on okay, let me rephrase this correctly. I basically made a video of me showing you that Linux is really not hard when it comes to everyday use. And one of the first things I did was I showed people on how to, you know, install Linux using a virtual machine. And the first distro I picked is Mint because it's easy to use. It has everything installed, like everything that you need on a daily basis. And within that video, I want to say it took us minutes to install Linux Mint. And that's it. That's pretty much it. There was no need to use the terminal. In fact, we didn't even touch the terminal. We only installed Linux Mint, installed all of the necessary drivers using the software store, software manager, and we basically installed software like Steam, Bottles, Heroic, and OBS, and that's it. When it comes to picking distributions, if you're new, I recommend you start with either Fedora, Mint, Kubuntu, which I believe uses KDE Plasma. I'm not sure. You can use Ubuntu, and that's pretty much it. The other ones, especially Arch, I don't recommend it since it's not a distro for beginners. It's more of an advanced distribution since you have to store everything from scratch using the terminal, which is something a lot of people freak out when they think about Linux. They think it's about, you know, using the terminal just install software, one software, which is not true. Debian is, I don't know, I haven't used Debian, but from what I heard, a lot of their software is old, so you might not get the latest updates, and installing it is also, I want to say it's not too easy or too difficult. It's kind of in the middle, so it's something I do not recommend you use. Gentoo Linux is actually the hardest distribution, so this one requires you to compile everything from scratch, from my understanding, and yeah, so this one is a no-go for beginners. So if you're starting out, I recommend Mint, Ubuntu, or Fedora. The rest, I do not recommend you use them.
Oh, yay, so many of them. I hear people going like, I don't know which one to pick. What do I do? There's so many. Just pick one. It's a wonderful thing that you can choose. Don't you understand? The world is your flavor. Look at all these spices. I went with Mint because it's the same one that I installed 15 years ago. And
Mint is a very good choice, and a lot of people who make these videos on, you know, switching to Linux, they pick Mint, and Mint is always a good choice because again, it's easy to use. It comes with everything you need pre-installed, and overall, when it comes to like the user experience, it's pretty good and it's very easy to use. So Mint is the best option for beginners.
And I knew that it was beginner friendly and that it still holds up. It very much feels like Windows, just better, okay? You don't even need to touch the scary terminal. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's okay. You should though. Now, let's jump into my computer really quick. Oh, look at that. I'm recording with OBS. Open source is always the best.
Yeah, OBS works on Linux, so it's something that shouldn't surprise a lot of people. I am using OBS to basically record this video, so yeah.
That's source. Couldn't get Bandicam. They didn't have a Bandicam. I can't believe I paid for that. There's like free versions everywhere. That's so much better. Okay. All right. So this is the terminal. You probably heard about it in Linux. Feels a bit strange at the beginning. Let me just show you how it works. But first, wait. Oh, yes. Today's sponsor. 3, 2, 1. Wrong. Jifyon. Wow. Look at ASCII art. I love it. Beautiful PewDiePie tub. Right now, you get a free PewDiePie shit.
I really like the way he introduced the sponsor base in the terminal. That's very cool. That's very cool. I was not expecting that.
Days, so take the chance now. Don't wait, please. Brofist, thank you.
That is very cool. See, this is one of the things I like about Linux. You can do whatever you want. In this case, you can customize the terminal however you want. Of course, it doesn't come with its challenges. You have to do a bit of research, but as long as you get hang of Linux, you can go from beginner to this within maybe a few days, weeks, months, depending on how fast you learn stuff. This is cool.
But I just wanted to show some terminal commands really quick, just so you get an idea how it works. I talked about this in my last video, but the first thing that really blew my mind with Linux, I just noticed my computer was booting kind of slowly. So I found this command called systemdanalyze, and it tells you exactly how long it takes for your computer to actually load and what part takes a certain amount of time. And it used to be like 45 seconds. I was like, dude, this is terrible. So then I found another command called blame, and then you can see exactly what part is kind of slowing down your system, which got me into like really optimizing it. And I had so much fun doing that. And it just made me realize, just like on Windows, if my computer is kind of slow, you just kind of deal with it. It's like,
yep, like I said, with Linux, you can do whatever you want. In this case, you have the option to customize the way you want to run Linux. And that's something that you do not have on Windows, unfortunately. Windows, they decide how they want you to run your system. On Linux, you can do whatever you want. And I know I keep repeating this, but this is just the truth. On Linux, you can do whatever you want.
it's like, oh, okay. Well, what can you do? On Linux, it's like, the world is your oyster. You can fix it. Personally, I like that kind of stuff. The second thing that blew my mind with the Linux terminal was just how...
Now, of course, one thing I will have to consider, if you want to actually, go through this route of making sure that your Linux distribution boots up quickly, then I'm afraid you might have to use the terminal, because this stuff is a little bit advanced. And even I've never done this before. So just a warning for those who are going to switch to Linux. If you want to do this, then I'm afraid you have to use the terminal. It's not scary, it's not daunting, but again, you might want to get comfortable using it. So that's something I also want to add.
How fast it is at searching. Searching on Windows is so annoying. It takes forever.
Yeah, so this is one thing I don't like about Windows. So every time I'm on my other second PC, which has Windows, and when I type something, just look at this. It takes so much time, and I'm like, what's going on? What is it searching for? And bear in mind, I don't have like a very slow system. My system is pretty decent, but Windows takes this much time just to do a simple research. That to me personally is just no.
Sometimes it doesn't even find the file, even though you...
Couldn't agree more. It doesn't do that. On Linux, it does.
Searching files on Linux is super fast. It made me realize just how it should be on a computer again. The most obvious thing with the terminal is that, let's say you install the operating system and you need to also put all the programs that you want to use on it. Usually you have to go on the browser, Google it, look up their page, go to their download page.
Yeah, so this is like the Windows way of downloading software, in this case VLC. Not that there's nothing wrong with it, it's just that the thing is, you don't know the exe you're downloading if it's contained with malware, which is why every time I use Windows, I like when I download software like this or like any other, I don't know, software I need to use, I always double check if it's not infected with malware. It does take a lot of time because, well, you have to download the exe, you have to execute it with permissions, of course. Then you have to, start looking for where you want to install the software. Once you do, you basically open it and you're done. On Linux, it's very simple. So I'm going to open Software Manager. And let's say I want to download, I don't know. Let's say I want to download Kdenlive. So this is the software that I mentioned earlier, which is a video editor. On Linux, you have two options. You can pick the Flatpak version, which is like a sandbox environment for running, I want to say all Linux software, which is good for security reasons because it just overall much more safer, basically. Or you can pick the RPM, which is like specifically for this distribution. In my case, it's for Fedora. Now there are other ones like Deb, I believe, which is for Debian, and I don't know, I'm not sure if tar is also the one. I could be wrong, but I'm sure for Debian you can also use the native package for that. But I'm just gonna pick Flatpak, and as you can see, all you need to do is to pretty much install, and once it's done installing, that's it. I can launch the software, I can start editing whatever I want to edit. So it is pretty much that simple.
Watch all the fake ads and all that crap, and do that and install and run each one. Wait for it to install, yada yada. It takes forever. On Linux, you just go sudo apt.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, he's using the terminal, so you can also do that as well. A lot of people freak out when they want to install a specific software or, I don't know, application on Linux, and they think, oh, you have to do this through a terminal, it's difficult. It's really not. Let's actually watch how he installs whatever he wants to install. It's really not difficult.
Install, what do we want? We want VLC, Firefox, OBS Studio, boom,
So you see, he pretty much typed what he needed. He typed VLC, Firefox, OBS Studio, then he entered his password. And the terminal is basically trying to look for these available, if these like apps or software available, and it's not gonna say, hey, do you want to continue? And if you type yes, it's going to install everything and you're done. On Windows, this would take like, I don't know, to take probably 3 minutes at least. On Linux, it takes you less than a minute and you have everything you need.
And now I can sit and look at the screen and feel like I'm a hacker. Yes, I know what all of this means. Every single letter I'm soaking in with my brain. There's so much you can do with the terminal. It's insanely powerful. I can make a whole video about it, but I don't want to keep this too long-winded. And in reality, I just want to show you my rise on my laptop, to be honest. That's the whole reason I'm making this video. I had this old laptop. I mean, it's not that old, but I just never used it because I didn't really like using it. I mentioned before there's many distros of Linux, and I wanted to try one called Arch, partially because of the meme. It's kind of become a meme because it's a little difficult to install Arch, so it's like a flex to use it. For some reason, I went on a god run and I had no issue.
Well, ironically, it was considered the hardest distro, but nowadays I don't think I would consider it as like the hardest distro, simply because when like the way people install Arch is they use the Arch wiki, which is like a detailed guide on how to basically install Arch. But with a simple Arch install script, you can install Arch within minutes. And I made a video about that. I literally installed Arch Linux on a virtual machine, and that didn't go well because there were like some settings I forgot to disable, which is secure boot. Otherwise it would work. So I had to disable secure boot and had to install Arch again, and it worked. Installed it on virtual machine and everything worked. The moment I installed Arch using the Arch install, it was not only easy, but I was able to get a working like a working distribution within minutes. So Arch is, in my opinion, not considered the hardest, but it is still a bit advanced because you have to install everything since it comes with bare bones. So you have to understand how Arch works, configure everything. There's a lot you have to do for Arch, and Arch also kind of expects you to know what you're doing, and it expects you that you have enough time to configure Arch. So
all right, let's go into my laptop. I think it makes sense for me to show it without any customization first because it just be confusing and I need to talk to people that haven't used Linux. My first favorite thing, which I have on Mint as well, is just shortcuts on my keyboard to open programs. Open terminal, open file manager, open browser, close.
oh, so he's using Hyprland. I have to say, PewDiePie is really loving Linux. So for those who do not know, Hyprland is a tiling manager. So if you're someone who's addicted to tiling managers, if you come from Mac, I don't know if Windows allows you to do this. I don't think so. But yeah, if you are someone who's addicted to like tiling managers, then you definitely want to give Hyprland a try because Hyprland allows you to customize not only the way you want it to look, but you can use like these tiling managers. So basically he's launching files. He launched the terminal. I'm guessing this is Firefox. So Hyprland is definitely flexible. It's definitely not easy to use because you have to configure it on your own, unless if you download like certain how do you call it, like if you download a Hyprland desktop, which you can find on GitHub. You can find some that were already made, or if you want to go through the longer route of understanding how Hyprland works and basically trying to configure everything on your own, which is something I'm actually working behind the scenes, and I might make a video about it. But Hyprland is pretty much amazing. So that's something I was not expecting him to use Hyprland. That's pretty cool. I also like the way he writes this. It's pretty good.
I've been doing so much more. I built this camera as well. Like I mentioned earlier, you can communicate with Linux even without a graphical user interface, GUI. That made me so excited because I'm like, wait, that means I can use other computers at my disposal. For some reason, to me, that's just like really cool. And I wanted to try what I could do with it. I want to show this in another video maybe because I feel like it's too much yapping. But my point is, I've been having so much fun. Just tinkering, messing around, feeling like a hacker. But I gotta be real as well. Linux is not perfect. There's a lot of issues. A good example is, again, my laptop. When I first installed Arch, none of my F keys worked. Actually, sorry, 3 out of 12 worked out of the box.
Really? That's very, very weird. Okay.
So I had spent a long time bringing them back to life. For me,
okay, I'll say this. When it comes to I want to say keyboards, mouse and everything, from my understanding, 80 to 90% of the peripherals do work on Linux, with only a few exceptions. So if you use something like a tablet for if you want to play OSU, from my understanding, 90% of the tablets will work. Some will not, due to them not having like a compatibility or something. Yeah, that's something that you might run into as someone who's new. Although this is like very, very rare for like a peripheral not to work on Linux. It's very rare. From my experience, never had this issue. All of the stuff just worked when I installed Ubuntu and then moved to Fedora. So something you might run into, but again, this is very rare.
It was kind of fun. I was like, oh, got another one working. Like, okay, let's move on to the next one. But I can imagine for a lot of people,
but at least he was able to solve that, so
just want things
that's
to work.
good.
You know, maybe this is not for you, and maybe it should work. You know, I think since Linux is not as popular on desktop as Windows or Mac, this is just the reality. There's just not enough support for it. On Linux, if something doesn't work, it's kind of up to you to fix it, and yeah, that's just how it is.
But yeah, that's the thing I like about Linux. Not everything is going to work, so the only option you have is you have to figure that out by doing research. And if you can get something to work on Linux, it's going to feel amazing. Now, obviously on Windows, if you run into certain issues, you can do research and you'll be able to fix what you're going through, which is not a problem. On Linux, since again, it's not popular, which is something I do agree, because not a lot of people are adopting to it. There's a chance that people might run into issues, and if they don't have time or if they don't care, then I don't think Linux is for them. So that's what I think.
I was trying to update my drivers for my GPU, and I got a black screen 6 times, and I had to do a hard restore every time. It's, you know, not the most fun thing in the world.
Okay, so this is something that's very common, especially if you use a distribution like Arch, and especially if you use NVIDIA GPUs. So like I said from the beginning, Arch is not easy. You have to understand everything, including maintaining GPU drivers, especially after like a huge update, because there is a likely chance that you will get a black screen if you don't know what you're doing. So this is an issue you will definitely run into, especially if you use Arch, but I'm sure people will be able to fix this mostly. I want to say mostly, but if it's a black screen, yeah, it can be a pain to use Arch. That's also one thing to consider.
There are other things I could rather be doing, which is why I need you to install Linux, so the more people we can get together, the better Linux becomes. And I get it now. Like, that's why people...
I think for Linux to be fully, like for people to fully adopt and get used to Linux, it has to be as easy as possible, which is not going to be easy because, you know, the way Linux works with the terminal and all is very, very different, right? Because people don't want to see this, if I'm being honest. Even if I was like a Windows user, I would want to see this, but I'm like, what the heck am I looking at, right? Because this is not in the 90s or 80s where we're still using the terminal. So I think for Linux to be fully popular, I think it needs to get as easy as Windows. And another thing is, as it gets popular, a lot of developers eventually, not that I think it's going to happen, but for it to get popular, there has to be more like software, especially popular software. I think that's the only way for Linux to get popular. But at its current state, I think a lot of people are not going to adopt to it, simply because they prefer Windows. It has everything. It works, not want to say 80 to 90% of the time fine, although people run into their own issues. But yeah, I think time will tell if Steam Tech gets popular, just like what I said previously, and if this thing blows up, then people will consider, adding software for Linux and all. So that's something we're just gonna have to see and wait.
I can write a better kernel. Finnish naivety, typical Finnish behavior. They think they can do anything. But without that, you know, things would have been very different. At least there wouldn't be an alternative. And I just think it's so cool that people saw what it did, got excited, and wanted to join in. So please consider joining in. Now, if you're even just a little bit curious, I recommend trying Linux. Maybe try dual booting it if you're not sure. You can still keep your...
Again, this is something I highly, highly recommend. Or if you do not want to dual boot, because you have to understand how dual booting works, so it can get a bit complicated. What I also recommend is you run any Linux distro you want in the virtual machine, so that you can get comfortable using it before you actually get into it. Because one of the mistakes people make when they try to use Linux is that they remove their Windows partition and they install let's say Ubuntu, right? And they forget that not everything is, I want to say, rainbow on Linux, right? Your favorite games, especially if they're multiplayer, they're not gonna work. The software you use on Linux is not available, and you might have an overall bad experience, especially if you just jump in. So this is why a lot of people recommend either you dual boot, which if you know how dual booting works, fine. Or in my opinion, the best way to run Linux without messing with your Windows partition is to run it in a virtual machine. Because if you run it on a virtual machine, you're not only going to build experience, but you are going to basically have an overall comfortable experience in general. So in case if you don't like Ubuntu, you can move to another distribution, which is, I don't know, Fedora or Zorin OS, or you can move to Arch, So yeah, dual booting is one option, and virtual machine is another option, which is the one I highly recommend, especially if you're new.
Your Windows or whatever, you're gonna kill it later. You might as well kill it now. Test it out, break it, get upset. On Linux, I feel alive at last, at long last. Thank you for watching. Let me just type out my goodbyes. No.
Okay, yeah, so that command actually allows you to pretty much delete everything, which is overkill, but of course it's not gonna do that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That was the whole video. I hope you guys enjoy the reaction. If you have, of course you're gonna have opinions in the comments. I know that's one thing. Yeah, write them down in the comments. What do you think of this video? Are you going to switch to Linux? Are you going to Dualboot? What's stopping you from switching to Linux? And yeah, write all of that down in the comments. If you like the reaction, give it a thumbs up. And like I said, it's my first time reacting, so I might have made some mistakes here and there. I might have stuttered, but I'm learning. At least that's what matters. With that being said, it's your boy Jury. Have a good day, and I'm signing out.